Hey everyone, it's Tom Seymour from VHS Massacre Radio. Just doing a quick update. For those of you who don't know, VHS Massacre Radio, that is more of an independent film industry type podcast. We also have a podcast called Video Galaxy, in which Chris and Chris review various movies. So if you're looking for that type of thing, we have a separate show for that. But this one delves into not only the VHS Massacre documentaries, but also some industry information. I've had some good success in the festival run, so to some degree this may be useful for independent feature-length filmmakers who are trying to sort of get started, or people who have been in the business for a while and kind of know how things are. So some of the more exciting things that just happened was the Vancouver Horror Show just awarded us the Audience Choice Award, which was a huge deal. That actually happened last night, which was amazing. Also recently we won the Montreal Requiem Fear Fest. Fear Fest is a huge deal. We won Best Documentary there. And then just a few weeks back we won San Francisco Indie Fest, another Hole in the Head film festival. That's their genre fest. We won Best Documentary there. So that has been a total of 20 film festival wins for VHS Massacre Too, which is, of course, a feature-length documentary about how media consolidation has all but ruined the American exploitation film industry. So one of the things I think happened, in regard to film festivals, which I think is a topic that you could do a whole podcast about, just film festivals. One thing that's interesting is to look at what has happened with film festivals during the pandemic. What has happened is that a lot of the major film festivals, like South by Southwest and some of the other larger ones, had basically just canceled their festivals. They just said, we're not having them this year. Now, moving forward, they're in 2021, they may try to have them or do virtual festivals. But what I saw from the city film festivals and some of the genre festivals was that they went ahead and they figured out a way to do virtual screenings, and they, for the most part, it was absolutely excellent experience. So, if you look at what you think has happened in the festival circuit, I think you can separate the film festivals in two different ways. There is the sort of corporate film festival, and then there's the independent film festival. So, to be honest, a festival like South by Southwest, Sundance, Slamdance, Austin, the New York Film Festival, these are essentially corporate film festivals. They exist to serve the studio system in those films, which is why it's nearly impossible to get your film in there without representation, meaning that you have a producer's rep or an agent, or someone directly part of the film festival. So there's no surprise there that nepotism is a huge part of the film industry. And it's not necessarily nefarious. If you think of anyone who's ever made an independent film, if you've worked with some bad crew members and you just didn't get along with them, you really don't want to work with them again. So, let's say you work with a great DP and you have a relationship, you're going to want to work. You're going to want to work with them because you trust them, and to some degree, your career may depend on how good they are. They may be surrounding themselves with people that they know are reliable. So that can be part of it, but I think there is to some degree, I think there's actually a clear separation of corporate festivals versus independent film festivals, and I think you can see it And I think, if I decide to do a VHS Massacre 3, I actually may delve into the film festival circuit, because to some degree that has become the theatrical release for independent films. The movie theaters have all been struggling because of COVID, but even before COVID, it was pretty hard to get a theatrical run for independent content. So film festivals were a way that you could get your film out there. So, for instance, with my film, I think it got into about 26 film festivals, and it won 20 awards. So it basically played in a give or take about 25 different cities around the world, and that's very significant. Like, for instance, San Francisco Indie Fest. That film has been known as the Slam Dance of San Francisco. San Francisco Independent Film Festival is obviously like the Sundance. It's one of the top 10 film festivals in the world, and the sort of alternative fest is San Francisco Indie Fest. One of the great things about San Francisco Indie Fest is that you can read numerous articles about how they never sold out. They have multiple genre festivals that they run, and they still take small exploitation and low-budget films and truly independent films that are not funded by the studio system, are not their ranks are not filled with A-list producers and actors and all that stuff. They just happen to we're lucky enough to keep growing and growing without having to totally sell out to being just an arm of the studio system. We also did well in Canada. Vancouver Horror Show and Montreal Requiem Fear Fest, I think partially too because they have an entirely different film system. Not only is their television and film studio system required to take independent content, I think that even includes promoting their film festivals on local media and things like that. Like there is a requirement to promote independent content, and I think they have a different relationship to independent film, and I think that was to our advantage. So the larger film festivals that we got into in Canada, we won, and I think maybe that's part of it. Some of these city festivals and independent film festivals really pushed through and made some great shows. In England, the Spirit of Independent Film Festival, they pushed through. They did a virtual fest. Dracula Fest pushed through. To round out the sort of festival run of VHS Massacre, some of the cooler screenings and awards have been the ones I mentioned, plus Miami Sci-Fi. We won there. Vegas Movie Awards, the 41st Annual Telly Awards, Independent Horror Movie Awards. We also played at the New York Filmmakers, New Filmmakers New York at Anthology Film Archive. That screening happened just before COVID started. Bare Bones Film Festival, Charlotte Film Festival, HorrorCon UK, Milwaukee Twisted Dreams. We played in Siberia at the Kankst Film Festival. We won. We got merit awards at Los Angeles Underground Film Forum and Los Angeles Independent Film Festival Awards. We were like semi-finalists there. So what you have is a situation where I made a documentary about the American exploitation film and how media consolidation is kind of sort of erased that. And it's weird because the film festival circuit kind of reflects what I was saying about streaming. And what is great is that there still seems to be a fairly vibrant independent film festival circuit around the world, and that actually seems fairly healthy. So that's a good thing. There have you hear these stories. There was a story about a guy who sent back when Sundance was taking DVD submissions. There's a story of a guy who deliberately sent in a blank DVD, and he got back the same rejection form letter. We loved your film; it was great, but we couldn't include it. So there's all sorts of stories like that where film festivals are just not holding their end of the bargain. They're essentially just like Netflix, just like some of these other streaming formats. They were built upon the backs of independent and low-budget content. And same thing with Sundance and Slamdance and all that stuff. Now they would say now, like, oh, we don't make much from submission fees, but the truth is, with 12,000 film entrants in Sundance charging $60 or $70, you're making whatever that is. You're approaching $1 million in entry fees, and to say that doesn't pay for some interns, or to say that doesn't pay for some volunteers or some advertising, is total horseshit. And we've been sort of told the same story from these large festivals, that our submission fees don't really pay for the film festival. But we know for a fact of course they did in the beginning, and of course they do now. They just are funded 5 different ways by the studio system. They're essentially a vassal of the studio system that feeds off of it. So they're getting corporate sponsors. People are doing different things that bring money into the film festival itself. And there's very few very large festivals that haven't sold out like that. I think what happens is, financially, a lot of these film festivals struggle, and because it's not an enterprise that can always turn a huge profit. A lot of these people do it because they love it, and when they're selling out, a lot of the times they're doing it because they're having trouble keeping it going to begin with. And so I have to say that, hats off to these smaller film festivals and city film festivals that keep going year after year. I think it's actually really important. It's pretty much the only way independent filmmakers can really have a theatrical run. So VHS Massacre 2 is probably going to come out the first quarter of next year. It's going to be released through Trome Entertainment. That's going to be on Blu-ray, and then it's going to hit their streaming service, and then after that it will probably be available on the other various streaming sites. We're really only waiting to hear back from a few more film festivals. So Glasgow Horror Film Festival, the British Horror Film Festival, Phantasmagoria, which I believe is a Spanish film festival, Lit Scares International Horror Film Festival, South Texas Underground Indie Fest, and Bloody Horror International Film Festival. At that point, we're pretty much done for the year. For the most part, I'm really happy with how it went down. The reason why I think it worked was we essentially had a documentary about horror and exploitation films. And this is sort of popular among, independent horror film festivals, but it's a documentary. And there's not that many documentaries about horror films. So in a lot of these cases, I think they would take our film because it was something that there wasn't that many of in that festival. So let's say you had 8 features that were narrative features. Well, they decided to put one doc in about the horror film industry. And so we fit in well to a lot of these film festivals. So I think it's very interesting, this idea of finding the right niche where you can stand out in your own way. And I think that's why we were able to win 20 awards as well, because we weren't, in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, we weren't competing head-to-head with narratives. We were competing head-to-head with horror documentaries, possibly why we're doing well. Also, the first VHS Massacre documentary about the decline of physical media, FilmRise had done the digital distribution, so it is screened on Mubi and Prime and iTunes and all these other places, and the word had gotten around pretty heavily about the film. So in making the sequel, I think it actually had a built-in audience, which is something that was unusual at the time. So I think that worked out really well. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.